Hi, panel. How is it that Australians all accept such an overrepresentation of First Nations people in our justice system as normal? Every single person in juvenile justice in the Northern Territory is an Indigenous Australian, and about 95% of the Alice Springs Correctional Centre population is an Indigenous Australian. The rest of the nation accepts this, despite national inquiries, royal commissions and so forth. When will we genuinely start addressing the social determinants of this abhorrent reality?
Ray.
Yes, there is. The pathway for a lot of Aboriginal children is from school to jail. And we don't have a crossroads there. It's just it seems like a freeway, a highway. And we as Indigenous peoples have tried to put that crossroads there, but it's not being supported enough. I know here in Redfern, for example, we've got a Clean Slate Without Prejudice program, which is trying to put that crossroads there between our community and the police and the jails. But that's our pathway. And inside those jails there, you got your uncles and your mothers and your fathers, and he's the child out here, I want to go and see Dad. Well, it's a straight pathway. So we know what the issues are, but we don't have the incredible resources necessary to be able to put in a crossroads there.
Do you think it's just about resources, though?
Well, there's a lot of money spent on new jails, and it shouldn't be spent on that. It should be spent in the educational sector so that our children do get a better opportunity at education and to be able to make their own decisions on what they want to do with their lives. And, I mean, the system has failed as well, but we know that the pathway there, from our families to the schools, we don't have the cross path there. We don't have a wall there to say you don't have to go to jail. There's another way out of this. And the only way we can do that is to really, really look at the education system and say, listen, you've got to pick up your game, make sure that you're doing the best you can to ensure that our children get the best education so that they can make the choices and the decisions they need to make for their own future and for their families.
Ronni, I know you're always interested in solutions. You sort of tackle complex problems. Do you see solutions in this area that aren't immediately apparent?
I think when you rob a nation of their culture, you lose the ability. Somewhere along the way, there is such a void that has to be filled. We've got to put Indigenous culture back into the full education system, not just for
Amen.
Indigenous people, so that we all understand and value the loss, so that all along the pathway, we start restraining the system. I mean,
yes.
They can't have to get, it's not about getting to the crossroads. We have to prevent them getting on that path in the first place. And that is about equality. We have to bring out the bad word, it's racism. We have to deal with these things. And quite honestly, it has to start at the top. It's back to that leadership issue. It's back to how do we treat all people equally? It's about equality.
Kerry.
And we've got to start with the, not in kindergarten, but before kindergarten, preschool, so that our children are actually educated before they get into the system, so that by the time we get to that year 12, there is a path. And I'm part of a school that's shown that can happen. So it's not that difficult to do, but it does need a lot of resources.
I think one very obvious way, when we talk about education, how about a proper education of the police around Australia and the way they implement the law, and of the whole justice system. I don't know the status of courses relating to history, culture, tradition, the colonial heritage in the police academies around Australia, but it's evidently not enough. I don't know how often, I don't think I've heard a police commissioner publicly and repeatedly showing the leadership publicly as well as privately and urging their respective police forces to actually learn more and come to a better understanding of those things of which Indigenous Australians have been deprived, often brutally, often savagely, over centuries. That has to be very much a part of the education process.
Even if it were to change today, when you reflect on your lifetime and changing attitudes, even the things that are recognised currently, how do you reflect on what you missed, what you didn't learn early on?
Well, I mean, it's only relatively recently when I was writing a book about it that I discovered the full extent of my own ancestors' share of the spoils. They came as convicts but did very well out of the Indigenous dispossession as pioneers moving through New South Wales up to Queensland, driving herds of cattle and so on. And the kind of massacres and atrocities that took place through their history. Nothing from them specifically that I was able to determine. And they were highly respected by white communities, but they were a part of a process of dispossession. I've seen it as a journalist. I've been covering Indigenous issues for 50 years. I've watched the 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and the 1 step forward and the 2 steps back. I saw Australians divided over the whole issue of Indigenous and non-Indigenous engagement in Australia through the Howard years. I thought that on this issue particularly, John Howard was a divisive Prime Minister, and the evidence is there to support that. And I think we still pay a price, and our Indigenous Australians still pay a price for that. I think we non-Indigenous people have a huge responsibility to educate ourselves a lot better. I had no education. My generation had no education. We had to educate ourselves as adults rather than as children.
Okay.
2 things that could happen there. One is I think that the federal government needs to remove immediately the Northern Territory intervention. That's been the most brutal, devastating action by a Prime Minister that's ever been perpetrated on our people. That's the first thing. They can remove that tomorrow, and it would free us up, especially us men, to be able to participate more in our communities and take out all those bureaucrats from our communities. The second thing is we need to reread the Royal Commission into Black Deaths in Custody, because those 370-odd recommendations, the only one that really became public was one of the last ones. I think it was 38th one, on reconciliation, on the process of reconciliation. But even that's flawed.
Okay.
But that Royal Commission into Black Deaths in Custody gives all the information that we need in terms of the ways in which we can implement those recommendations, but they have been overlooked.
And that was 1987. That was commissioned by Bob Hawke. 1987.